and I'm going to introduce, okay, I will introduce Jessica, and then I will give it over to Jessica. So to start, I want to thank everybody for coming. My name is Dr. Londa Irvin. I'm the Executive Director for Multicultural Services and Programs. And this is our series that we've been doing this semester, focused on social justice. I luckily ran across Jessica, her work during our shutdown in March and April. And I started to call her and bug her. And she graciously agreed to come in and speak to iState about different issues focused on social justice. And she does want you all to, to make sure you have a pen and pencil. Put it on speaker view, because that will allow you to actually see who's speaking, and that will be Jessica. So without further ado, I'm going to give you to Jessica Pettitt, and I thank you once again for coming.
Well, thank you very much for the nice intro. While sheltering in place out here in Northern California, it's really nice to have someone say something nice about me every month. And I watch the recording on repeat in between therapy appointments. So thank you very much. It's super exciting to be here, and it's nice to be part of a series. And I mentioned last time, like whatever lens people wanted to work on, let me know, and we could do this process for whatever lens. And what's interesting is that the process is repeatable regardless of lens. And so we picked the unknown. So whether we are talking about religion and politics, or how racism or sexuality is going to show up in the next several months, if we're talking about the election, we're talking about COVID, we're just talking about how is it already November 10th? What happened to July? There's all different kinds of unknown or uncertainty here. So what I want to do is I want to lead you through a process that we're going to use the unknown or uncertainty as the lens. But as you get familiar with the process, you can actually do this again on your own with any social identity or any other kind of lens that you want. Now, for a webinar, this will be kind of a strange experience in that you're actually going to spend a little bit of time at the top of this webinar in silence. So for the recording, etc., people are going to be like, I think something's wrong with her internet. But you'll see it coming. I'll tell you, there'll be a timer. But I want to make sure that you know that you have the process to go through. So then we will go and have a conversation afterwards. As you're going along, if you have any thoughts or comments, please feel free to text message me at 202-670-4262. That's including if you're watching the recording. And you are going to need pen and paper for the process for the activity itself. In order to do social justice work, I think we have to get in the habit of being reflective of who we are and how we are. So this is just a process to kind of help with that. And again, today we're going to use the lens of the unknown or uncertainty. The idea of being able to do this process allows you to understand how you show up in these conversations, where your identity and your lived experience is informing how you show up, but also your unconsciousness of how you're showing up. So then you can actually go back through all the messages you have learned throughout all the time of your life and use those as the best tools to become more conscious of what you were unconscious of. So again, you will need pen and paper. Some of you thought I was kidding. I'm actually not kidding. You really will need pen and paper. So what I'm going to ask you to do is you're going to go through a series of 4 prompts. During that time frame, I'm going to mute it. It'll be quiet. You need to use me as an excuse. Look, I'm in a meeting. It's just quiet. But I want you to record messages that you have learned about the particular prompt. So now that you have your paper, you're going to divide it into 4 quadrants. You can either write a big plus sign or a big X. You don't need a ruler. And you're going to number each of those quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to give you a prompt one at a time. You can always go back and visit the other prompts. But what I want you to do is to have a little bit of time carved out so that when you're using that time, what you're doing is you are being reflective on what and how you and your life would respond to the messages you have learned about that prompt. Now, if I was doing this in person, I would have to say this, but even virtually, I have to say this. You are not going to fax your sheet of paper to anybody. This is a conversation you are literally having with yourself. And I want you to notice when you start to edit the answers that come up and you're like, oh, I can't write that down. Oh, she's not going to want to know that. I'm never going to see your sheet of paper, nor are you ever going to have to share the sheet of paper with anybody else. But it is interesting for you to notice which parts of your life you bring forward and which parts you edit out, because you are literally having a conversation with yourself about messages you have learned about yourself. So when you start saying, well, I don't know what the right answer is, please note you are the only person who is going to know what messages you have learned about yourself through the life yourself has experienced. Does that make sense? So we're going to get started. So make sure that you have your sheet of paper divided into 4 quadrants, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We are going to start with quadrant number 1. Quadrant number 1 is messages that you have learned about yourself. We're going to use the lens of uncertainty. So what I want you to do is in quadrant 1 is I want you to record messages you have learned about how you deal with the uncertainty or how you deal with the unknown. What does that look like for you? What have you learned across your life related to dealing with the unknown or uncertainty? I'm going to set a timer for about 4 minutes and then I'll be right back. Come on in. We are working on an interactive activity where you are being reflective and you're going to need pen and paper. So those of you that are coming in, I'm happy to catch you up to date. Those of you who are working on it already, you still have about 3 minutes left for quadrant 1. So those of you just coming back, you're going to need sheet of paper and you're going to need to divide that sheet of paper up into 4 quadrants. Just draw a big X or a plus on your sheet of paper. And then you're going to spend 3 minutes recording any kind of messages you have to yourself about how you deal with the unknown or uncertainty. So think about it as like leaving breadcrumbs to yourself across your life about all the different times you have dealt with the unknown or uncertainty and what messages you have learned about how you deal with the unknown or uncertainty. So I'll give you about 3 minutes. You have about 2 minutes left. If you need to, just kind of notice if there's certain periods of your life that you're focusing on and other periods of your life that haven't come up. If there's periods of your life of dealing with the unknown or uncertainty that you have edited as like, oh no, I don't want to write that down. No judgment, just notice. Quadrant 1 is just messages that you have learned from your life and your lived experiences of dealing with the unknown or uncertainty. Okay, I think that's your time for that particular quadrant. So what I'm going to ask you to do is you're welcome to come back and visit it anytime you want to. Again, the whole point of this process is to understand the process, and then you can reapply the process using any social identity or any kind of lens. Today, we're going to focus on the unknown or uncertainty and how you deal with that lens. So if quadrant number 1 is messages you have learned about how you deal with the unknown or uncertainty, then quadrant number 2 is messages you've learned about how other people deal with the unknown or uncertainty. Quadrant 1 is you, quadrant 2, everybody else. Messages you have learned about other people other than you when you're dealing with the unknown or uncertainty. And again, I will give you about I wondered why the timer didn't go off because I set it for 4 hours. So I'm going to give you about 4 minutes and we'll see what you need. Here you go. About 2 minutes left. Messages you have learned about other than yourself people. If anything comes up that is about yourself, go back to quadrant 1 and put it in there. Notice there's particular parts of your life you're focusing on. No judgment, just notice. All right. I am assuming that was enough time with that quadrant. Now, here's what's interesting about this process. Again, you don't have to participate out loud. I just want you to look at your sheet of paper that you are not turning into me and I will never see. When you look at your sheet of paper, quadrant 1 was how you doing. Quadrant 2, how everybody else doing. So what ends up happening is quadrant 2 becomes these extremes. Almost always what gets reported here in quadrant 2 are the extremes. So when we start talking about the unknown, what this is the Instagram mom who's like learning 4 languages and gonna have abs of steel and is perfecting her Sanskrit with a twig she made from the backyard. Or that one friend of yours that hasn't gotten off the couch since March 6th. So then you have these extreme responses to the unknown or uncertainty, but there's a whole bunch of ways of dealing with this in the middle. But I just want you to notice that often what happens, regardless of which social identity we're using, there's your life. And then quadrant 2 ends up these very like bookend extremes. Like, well, I'm not this bad. I brushed my teeth this week. Right. And then there's what you judge yourself against because you killed your sourdough starter for the 5th time. So that ends up being what's in quadrant 2. So what I want you to do in quadrant 3 is even more people other than them. So messages you've learned about dealing with uncertainty about even more people other than you. If quadrant 2 is going to be the extreme, who are you leaving out? And give them some space, give them some real estate in quadrant 3 about messages you have learned about kind of maybe the normal people floating in the middle of those 2 extremes, or the average or typical people. So go ahead and work on that, and I'll give you 4 minutes.
Jess, I can't wait to talk, right?
Yep,
You know this is killing Mickey. I just want you to know this is killing me, right?
I do. Just
Okay.
wait. There's one more quadrant.
Okay.
Here, we'll jump ahead. We'll go do it right now. I do recommend breathing. According to my therapist, I'll save you a copay. It's free. You just breathe things out. Go ahead. Breathe. I say the words, I just don't do it. Okay, last quadrant. This one sometimes comes with a vocabulary lesson. So quadrant number 4 is messages you have learned from times where you have colluded or participated in a silencing or marginalizing act. Now, some of y'all are like, are we talking about the unknown? What are you talking about? What? So here's the examples with clients that I am dealing with right now. So first off, collusion means you didn't do it, but you didn't stop it. And participating means you did it. So now we're talking about dealing with the unknown or uncertainty. Sometimes that can be confusing. If we were talking about racism or homophobia or transphobia, it's a little bit easier to identify when you might collude or when you might participate. But here's the kicker. Did you mean internally or externally? And the answer is yes. When we start talking about coping with the unknown, you and other people have come up with strategies to help you cope with the unknown that you sabotage internally or externally by colluding or participating against them. So I want you to leave a note for yourself about messages you have learned, not necessarily instances or examples of where you've done this, but messages you've learned from times when you have done this. So if we use, for example, we're so excited that somebody is out on paternity leave, eventually we get mad at them for not being at work because they're on maternity leave, right? So like you were supportive and now you're pissy about it. If we were to say inside COVID, I have 3 giant beast dogs. You have heard them in the recordings. My giant beast dogs, it would make sense. I need to get out of this chair and I need to go outdoors. And now that it's not ashy and smoky, I should take my dogs on a walk. I'm not allowed to say that word, a W. I should take them on a W. Maybe I'll go on 3 W's a day and we'll get some alone time and that would get me out of my chair. I've been sheltering in place for 8 months. How many W's have I gone on? Not many. Why? Because I have this great idea, but I sabotage myself. So even if I have a break in between webinars, right? I'm like, oh, I should go on a W, right? No, you should not go on a W because you have to file that paper, or you should start prepping dinner or doing laundry, or I believe TikTok is open. So I can actively participate against sabotaging my own plan. And I can also have the inside voice going, it really is kind of a waste of time. I think it would actually hurt your foot. Maybe you should give your foot a break. And I just collude with the voices in my head, right? So if I do this internally, I am responsible for that. If I do this externally, I am responsible for that. And the best way to claim that responsibility is to keep track of the messages you have learned about times you have colluded or participated against yourself and against other people in quadrant number 4. It's the last one. And Dr. Urban, I promise you'll get to talk afterwards. But there'll be one more little thing and then the talking will happen. I promise. Okay, quadrant number 4. Here's 4 minutes. I'm hitting mute. All right, I am assuming that you are done with your 4 quadrants. Good job. Congratulations, you made it. Remember the free thing, breathe, inhale, exhale. Turn your sheet of paper over. If you're using some cute little journal thing, just go to another page. And what I want you to do after you breathe is I want you to draw another quick X or plus sign. Remember, if you have any comments or anything, you're welcome to text message me at 202-670-4262. But on this new page, real quick, just draw another plus or an X. I promise talking will happen soon. So plus or X. For some, self-reflection is something you do all the time, and others, it's new and it brings up lots of thoughts and feelings and actions and judgment and inadequacies and all kinds of things. So what I want you to do, draw a plus or an X. You're going to label that easy, hard, next, and promise. I want you just to spend a shake of a lamb's tail right now. What is easy and hard for you? Now, clarification, do I mean about this activity? Sure. Do I mean about this particular Tuesday? Sure. Do I mean about this particular time in my life? Sure. Do I mean whatever else you could come up with? Absolutely. What is easy and what is hard as you define what is easy and hard right now? Just jot some stuff down, easy and hard. Easy and hard. Next and promise. The next 2 quadrants, next and promise. For some people, you instantly are like, I gotta do this thing. Or I make a promise to myself. I will go on a W instead of talking about it on a webinar again. Still haven't gone on a W. What are you gonna do next? And what promises do you need to make to yourself right now about however it is you are doing or treating yourself or others? What do you need to do next? What kind of promises do you need to make? Okay, assuming you have those identified, because I promised you weren't going to have to disclose any of the messages you've learned or any of the experiences you've had. This is a challenge by choice situation. This webinar is about messages you have learned about your own life. So I don't even need to know the resume of your life, of what you have survived or what you have done. That's not what this is about. What this is about is, how are you doing? What messages are you learning about how you are doing? And how did you start learning to be how you are doing now? Using your whole life as a reference tool, the messages you have learned because of what you have done in your life is literally what has taught you to be doing how you are doing right now. So what I thought we would do in the time that we have left is, how is that? What is easy for you and hard for you right now? What do you want to do next? What do you promise to yourself or others? So in the remaining half or so of the webinar, what I want to do is take easy and hard first. And I would like for you to share. This is the talking part. But I'd like for you to share what is easy and hard. What came up for you that is easy or hard? What does that mean for you? Dealing with uncertainty or unknown is both easy. If you just let go, you don't have control of nothing and you don't know nothing. That is really easy, except it's incredibly hard. And then there's the unknown, right? It's super easy. You don't know nothing. Next, the answer is I don't know. Oh, okay. Well, that seems easy enough, except nope, it's not. So if you want to unmute yourself, or you're welcome to use the chat too, but what is easy and hard for you in general?
Go ahead, Vic.
Well, what is easy for me is my job is easy. I've done it for 24 years. If I don't have it down now, then I'm not going to. What is hard for me is getting places that I want to go and I want to go because I'm limited on mobility.
Mhm.
Another thing that is easy for me is giving advice if someone asks me, for advice. What is hard for me is those are the things that came up to me right away.
Nice. That's great. Thank you very much, Vicki, for sharing. Also easy is seeking advice or following advice. Oh, I guess easy is the seeking advice and the hard is following the advice. Good job, Martha. Dr. Irvin, what about you? Easy and hard.
You know what? I'm right now, I'm stuck in a space due to something that recently happened. So I find it easier for me to look for triggers in messages that I would not have taken to consideration. A conversation that was thrown at me is because I'm cisgender, I don't understand this, or because I'm this, I don't, and I'm not taking well to those categorizations that I don't understand something because I'm not part of that community. So the easy is that I recognize that is an issue for me.
Mm-hmm.
My hard is I need to learn how to step back and breathe, as you said, before I respond, because it's always in a professional way. So in a private setting, I can say what I want to say. In a professional setting, you have to coach what you say, but you also have to figure out what are your triggers at the beginning. You have to acknowledge these things I have issues with when someone just throws this conversation, and I have to figure out how I'm going to respond. Martha knows exactly what I'm talking about because it recently happened. That's why it's stuck in my head. And
Mhm.
everything that I've done has been written about that one email. Though it was just a lengthy email traffic going back and forth. And it just put me in a very bad space.
Mm-hmm.
And it like I said, it awoke triggers for me. And I didn't know that they were there until that conversation, unfolded.
Yeah. And I would also challenge you to notice, and Cassie, I'm coming for you next, but I would also notice though, like imagine, give yourself some space and learn some messages, right? So like from a dominant privileged group as a cisgender person, I'm assuming a non-binary, non-gender conforming person told you, you can't get this because you're cisgender. And you're like, excuse me, do you know I am? So you're being like called out from a privileged identity space, right? So, but as a woman of color, if you were to tell a white person, you can't get this because you're a white person, and a white person's like, excuse me, like that's bringing up your subordinated, marginalized experiences. But it also is completely relevant to what happens when you have your dominant and privileged identities brought up, right? And isn't it fascinating that no matter how much education, no matter what our job is, we can get tripped up because we're used to having conversations. Not everybody is, but with your job, my job particularly, we're really used to having conversations from our subordinated places. And it's work for all of us to have conversations from our privileged or dominant places. And sometimes we think we're real good at it. And then we find out we're not. And we're like, whoa, 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 what's happening? What's going on? This is called a trigger. Did anyone see this coming? What's going on? Right? It's hard. You're muted, Dr. Irvin.
No, I was saying exactly. I didn't expect that in the conversation that we were having, or the direction it went.
Mm-hmm.
So I literally had to just stop communicating, and I had to stop communicating because it was like I'm penalized because I'm not part of the community, but I'm advocating for the community. If I don't do it, are you? You know what I'm saying? So if you're not going to step up to that plate and do that advocating, then you need to step back and let someone who will do it. So and half the conversation came from someone that was cisgender. And then so I said, so what are we talking about? I am the only, then I went to the point that, I'm the only Black person in this space. Martha's the only Latin person in this space. So should we come to you from those, from that kind of thinking like you just did. So it's very interesting, and it can happen in a heartbeat. It can happen in a heartbeat.
And you can also be, any of us could also be reacting from a pile up of responses in this particular moment while someone else is reading the actual transcript of this given moment. And they're like, where the hell is this coming from? What's going on? Right?
Exactly.
But if you flip the roles, you do it too. But when it's your turn, you're like, what is going on? What a fascinating pattern to notice about oneself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, Cassie, what's easy and hard for you?
Okay, for me, it's like easy to like be like kind towards like others and like loving and like caring on them. And then I feel like what's hard for me is doing that like for myself. Like not necessarily like self-care, but like okay, so I have anxiety, so I'll be like, oh, my anxiety is spiking up again. Cassie, why are you letting it do that? Like I just beat myself up about dumb things. I don't know.
I think anxiety is fueled by anxiety, which is weird, right? Is that when my anxiety flares, I get anxious about my anxiety flaring, and then it just is like a forest fire. So then if I'm like, oh, that's cool, then it's like, what? No, this is not cool. This is like full-fledged anxiety attack. Yeah, sure is. I recognize you. That can like sometimes like bring it down, and sometimes I just got to work through it. But yeah, absolutely, that's a great example of an easy and hard. That's your responsibility for you to notice about the messages you have learned about how you have or have not handled that well, and it splatters all over everybody else in the meantime. Blah. Bring paper towels. Yeah. All right, what about next and promise? Any next ideas that you need to state? Or promises you would like to proclaim?
I think my promise is to take a step back, to actually don't look at it so one-dimensional, to literally take a step back and breathe, and then, put my thoughts together. Because if I respond quickly, it's not good. Mm-hmm. So I have to remember that. Martha usually stops me before I respond to some emails. So I can't always rely on her to do that for me. So that's my promise, that I will actively do that. And then I will expand my triggering, because I need to know and because more and more different things are occurring now that will trigger some part, either my religion, my race, my sexuality, my non-sexuality, whatever. And I have to know those things about myself. And I've never had to sit down and categorize everything about me.
My dog is having a panic attack. I'm not sure which. But you're welcome to come to the webinar. Come on, say hello. I didn't mean to cut you off. He was like crying. I'm not exactly sure why. An example, if this is helpful for next or promise, Dr. Irvin, is I say I'm not going to respond immediately. That is false. I respond immediately. Sometimes it doesn't come out of a keyboard, which means nobody else receives it in writing, but I respond immediately.
Okay.
So what I have done is I have created approved things. I have two things that I can automatically say because I'm going to respond automatically. I can't stop the automatic response as much as I would like to, and it intellectually makes sense. I'm too extroverted. So I have two things. One is you are right. The other one is thank you. Instead of saying I'm sorry or something, just say thank you. Both of those you can say automatically, and at worst case scenario, it will confuse. Best case scenario, it will de-escalate you and how you are responding.
Yeah.
Right. So when you get called out or called in, whatever language you want to use, thank you. Right. Didn't know that. Now I know that. Thank you very much for the reminder. And you're right. Nothing diffuses something as much as you're right.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it's diffused, then you can gather your thoughts and figure out what the hell's going on. Now, there are some people in the world it's very hard to say you are right to, and there are some times where you don't want to say, I did not know that. But now you've narrowed down to those cases.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right, next and promise. Vicki, you want to go next?
Okay. Next I have down here, I am going to start thinking of myself. I'm going to think, I'm going to retire. So I'm starting to think about myself and quit worrying about everybody around me. It's time to, take stuff. And on the promise, I promise I'm doing it next year.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. You're going to retire next year?
Depends on how this COVID thing runs out. It'll either be in June at the end of the fiscal year or in December.
At the end of the calendar year. Got it. That sounds like a Post-it note waiting to happen. That's amazing. That's amazing. All right. Well, thank you very much. Cassie, do you want to go next? What are your next and promises?
So my next is I can't talk, sorry. My next and promises are to breathe, when my anxiety spikes up, instead of, just like self-consciously like destroying my brain. And more like self-care. So like I promise to do breathing and self-care. So what I offer to others, I need to offer to myself, basically.
Yeah.
But take your own advice. Why would we want to do that?
Yeah.
Cassie, I have a mortgage to pay. Don't go fixing everything. I need people to stay very messed up for a very long period of time. Yeah. Hello, it is about me. I'm going to be Vicki. I am thinking about myself here.
Wow. Wow. Really?
Did you mean something different? I'm sorry. You know what? You are correct. I will advocate for other people to do better because ultimately, what is it? Like all boats rise at the same time. What's that saying thing? You're right. We should probably just be good for everybody. Yeah, I know. It's funny until you're like, yeah, but it's kind of hard to do that all the time. Mm-hmm. Excellent. I really appreciate you sharing, Cassie. Martha, I know you were chatting in the text, but I don't know if you want to speak or you just need to chat. I can read it aloud. But what are your next and promises?
Well, I have to learn to believe in myself more. This is something that Alonda will tell you, because sometimes even after all these years and you have that imposter syndrome thing that I suffer every day. So I have to work on that and make a promise to myself to know that I've studied hard. I know where I'm at, but still that little id inside says, oh, no, you're not. You're being an imposter. So it's a tough call, but I'm going to keep working on it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's great. That's wonderful. When I kind of invented my approach to doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, the mantra that I came up with is do the best you can with what you got some of the time. And by doing the best you can with what you got some of the time, it actually lowers the bar enough that it becomes kind of scary because you run out of excuses or reasons as to why you can't do the best you can with what you got, right? So like, oh, I mean, she said the best I could do some of the time. I probably worked that out, I guess, right? Like that is a possibility, and we forget how accessible that possibility is, but it certainly is a possibility. Do the best you can with what you got some of the time instead of waiting until you're perfect, because doing the best you can with what you got some of the time is better than nothing never. And it takes into account the messages that you have learned across your life. It uses your lived experience as the best tool. It allows you to acknowledge you have an anxiety issue, and that is a part of you. So you don't wait until it's cured. You just bring it along in the suitcase. Do the best you can with what you got some of the time. When doing that, it will help in the individual conversations that are a little triggering. It'll help with some of that self-talk that you're trying to correct. It'll help make life decisions about whether or not you're advocating for yourself or others, or you're staying in a job that you don't really need to be, but you're trying to do it for other people, or if it really is about you and taking care of yourself and who and how you want to be in this one fine life, right? Doing the best you can with what you got some of the time is deeply rooted in the messages you have learned across your life. So this process that we just went through, I want to make sure that you know, and you're welcome to jot it down on your paper if you didn't, but the quadrant 1 is messages you've learned about yourself, regardless of the lens you choose. Quadrant 2, messages you learned about others, regardless of the lens that you choose. You're probably going to put extremes down, extremely better than you and extremely worse than you, because that's what we use to judge ourselves against. Why? Why do we have to be extremely good or extremely bad? Why can't we like fluctuate somewhere in the middle? Oh, quadrant 3, messages you've learned about people, not the extremes and not yourself, but everybody else. Give yourself a little bit of grace, will you? And give them some grace. And then that prepares you to really be reflective about what you have learned across your life when you have internally or externally colluded or participated in silencing or marginalizing yourself or other people. Now you can do something about it. Now you get to pick and choose who and how you want to be responsible for who and how you want to be in all of your relationships, and then do the best you can with what you got some of the time. That's how they all link together and come together as one. Thoughts or comments or questions about that? Clear as mud? Well, I know that this is the 3rd installment of a series, and I know that we're going to be doing some more stuff next semester too, but I'm glad that we're kind of landing on this note of self-reflection and self-responsibility, because that's a Venn diagram that's never done. So then I encourage you, go through this process again and pick race. Start at race, right? What are messages you have learned about your own racial identity? Quadrant 2, what are messages you've learned about other people than your own racial identity? You will pick some kind of extremes. Great. Quadrant number 3, how about everybody else that doesn't make those extremes? And then when is it time that you have learned from times where you have colluded or participated in a marginalizing or silencing act regarding race? Then try sexuality. Then try cisgender privilege, then try mental health related issues, then try religion and politics, then try disability or accessibility issues, then try age or gender or citizenship or language speaking. Like these lenses, it allows you to go through the process, and you're just reflecting on the messages you have learned with each of those lenses. Now that you have the process, you can pick one lens and go through it, have a conversation. Pick one lens, go through it, have a conversation. That is the power of messages you have learned about your life. And that is how you do the best you can with what you got some of the time.
That's interesting.
Mm.
I like how you interject it in just different lenses,
Mhm.
because there's still your assumptions and your opinion. So it's very subjective. But when you change those lenses, it's actually really telling on yourself. Not telling, but it can unfold things that you didn't recognize that you were holding.
Reflective.
Yeah,
And then
very.
don't forget the last little piece that seems like a throwaway, but how you doing right now? Right? What's easy? What's hard? What are you going to do next? What do you promise? Right? Like that's a really critical part as you repeat the process. Yeah. With that, high five. We made it through. Congratulations. Now you can talk and breathe and go have dinner and enjoy yourself. And I will see you on the flip side.
Well, can everyone please give Jess happy hands?
Dun, dun, dun.
And I will definitely not let you know what the other subjects, because I'll talk to Jess and we'll formulate her 3-hit wonder next semester. But you will be hearing from her again.
I gotta earn a unicorn backpack. I still gotta get.
Don't worry, we want to help you earn that backpack.
I know. Pressure's on. I'm yours.
Okay. And Kathy, I do have something for you, just dealing with the conversations we have had. I think it may help you navigate. Okay, but we'll try it out. But I do appreciate all of your attendance. And I wish you a great night. If I don't see you, have a great 2020, the rest of the 2020. We're down to what, 12 or 10 days of academic here in Terre Haute. Okay, yeah, we're after 2 weeks. The students are gone into January.
Wow.
No,
Well,
they're not liking it that much though, I don't think.
Be safe, be well, and I will see you on the flip side.
Thank you. Thank you
Hey,
all.
Jess.
Go ahead, Martha.
Hey, Londa. Oh, I'm sorry. Jess, did you not get a package from MSP?
Not yet.